pretty good.
No children's TV show trivia for me?
No.
Damn it.
From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. The Summer Olympics are back, and it's been a lot of fun watching all the new events like skateboarding and karate and surfing. But if you think those are fun, just wait for the new events added in 2024 like bottle flipping, holding your breath, and running with scissors. And now, broadcasting from the Churn, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
The Cinnamon Challenge didn't make it?
Yeah, I am shocked.
Oh, yeah.
I am done with the Olympics. Like, just, the whole thing is stupid at this point.
From this day forth, Jim Jobin will no longer try out for the Olympics.
Not only that, I'm pulling my endorsements, okay? Canceling all my commercials. It's just dumb. And like the other thing that's really stupid is, here are these people, they've trained their whole lives. This is their big shining moment in the sun. And anytime I go on Twitter and I see something about the athletes, it has nothing to do with what they do. It's like, this woman is appalled that she couldn't bring her breastfeeding child to the Olympics.
No one.
No, Twitter is the internet, man.
Twitter is such a tiny percentage of people just in this country.
The news. I mean, like, that's
It's not.
CNN and
It's
like,
not.
It's what I'm seeing, which,
Exactly.
sample size
That's
of one.
my point.
But it's just ridiculous. Like, that's all that
Your
they want to talk
bubble is
about.
not representative.
I feel that it is. I feel like I am John Q.
No,
Public.
but I do agree with a chunk of what you're saying.
Yeah, the Olympics is a
thing
joke.
The thing that always used to annoy me, and it feels like it's getting better the last several Olympics, maybe they kind of got the point, but it felt like for a while there that everybody had a tragic story that they were overcoming.
It's always that. They're looking for storylines.
Right. It was always,
cares.
it was only 3 months ago that
Something
so-and-so
bad happened, or this person was once an orphan and now they found their passion in racing. And it's like, it sucks because we have to attach emotional and dramatic narratives to this because it is so god-awful boring. And that is insulting to these poor athletes because they have really excelled and trained and had incredible discipline their whole lives.
How many
one very
athletes-
specific thing.
How many athletes did the U.S. send to the Olympics this year?
I'm going with 20.
Oh, way more than that.
Wait a minute. Is there bobsledding?
There's a whole softball
No,
team.
it's Summer Olympics.
There was Summer Olympics in the bobsleds. They have bobsleds in summer. Jamaica was in the bobsleds.
Okay, let me rephrase my answer. No.
Okay. So I'm going with less than 20 then.
Oh.
If there's no bobsledding?
No, it had to have been, I'm going to guess like 75.
75, and what's your final answer, Jim?
He says less than 20.
I'll go 76.
No. You already guessed. You said less than 20.
20.
613.
Damn.
Holy shit. Okay.
Yeah. So both of your bubbles are a little skewed here, guys.
I'm just saying they're overlooking
and that's
612
and that's
of those
just
people.
the U.S.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is a lot of people.
Holy shit. I had no
Right.
idea.
But the Olympics...
I'm not even sure that we are the largest contingent
that's
at
probably,
the Olympics.
That's a good point.
No.
I don't know that we're not, but I don't know that we are.
Man, I forgot. Like, there's so many huge team sports. So I said softball, but
Right.
then you've
There's
also
like
got
water
soccer.
polo, yeah.
You've got all
Basketball.
of these.
Well, but that's the thing, though. Nobody gives a shit. Like, if you win a gold medal in the Olympics, that is a lifetime accomplishment. That is the Grammys of sports. Like, you pull out a gold, it's like, hey, I won a gold medal. That's great, Bob.
We are going to get so much mail.
We're over it.
I think you got.
Nobody
I am on the other
cares.
side of this.
The only way that thing matters is if you just walk around wearing it all the time. And I still think it wouldn't matter.
I am very much on the other side of this.
You think it matters?
Yes. I think it's a big fucking deal.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
You do not. Are you watching any of the Olympics?
I'll watch some of it. Yeah.
What do you like to watch?
With the Olympics, honestly, if I have time and I'm sitting down and I turn it on, I will watch whatever it is.
Okay, you'll just turn it on and cruise.
Yeah.
Whatever's going on.
Because it's watching people who are the best in the world at what they do.
Yes.
Like it's interesting to it's like I'm not a huge tennis fan.
Right. But
if
seeing
I'm
the
flipping
best.
channels and it's like Serena or
Right.
Federer or one of those guys, Joka, like any of those guys,
Yeah.
like I'm like, oh, this person is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna sit here and admire how amazing this person is doing this thing.
I guess. That's nice. It's
okay.
a spectacle. That's fine.
So I watched I
still say it's the
I
Grammys
watched a
of
little bit of
sports.
handball today.
There's not handball
There
in the
is
Olympics.
handball.
You're full of shit.
I'm
been in
not
it since
full of
like
That's
shit.
not a thing. There is not handball in
Also,
the Olympics.
also historically,
it's probably volleyball.
the
you
Olympics
idiots.
are like important.
handball.
No, historically, the Olympics in general are
Oh,
important.
yeah. Granted. Yeah.
Jim just waved his hand at me and said, "Yeah."
Yeah. You know, to the
In the most condescending way. ever.
very, and that's what I wanted to communicate. Just flippant disregard. Just be like, yeah, I get it. Like, I get that they paused World War II and fucking the Nazis tried to win some races and got their asses beat. Or something. Yeah, that was really cool, and it meant dick. At the end of the day, you still had to win that fucking war.
God.
I'm just saying, the Olympics is overrated. This is the stand that I'm willing to take. So, good
I
luck,
watched,
everybody.
I watched handball, swimming.
I don't
Swimming
think
was
you
on,
get to question
gymnastics.
whether or not anyone is watching them and then say that they're overrated.
It's a joke. It's just a joke. Whatever. I'm more interested in the technical displays of the Olympics. Like, I guess they did like some kind of drone, like.
Oh,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
drone
the
thing
opening
was
ceremony.
incredible.
That's what I
Yeah.
heard. I didn't get to see it.
I'm more
I heard
impressed with that. Like,
Holy shit, that was incredible.
yeah. This is pretty cool
these
stuff,
drones,
man.
I mean, they formed the globe over the top of the opening ceremonies and
Oh,
everything.
wow.
I mean, it's something.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
See, that to me is the Olympics. It's the Olympics of this. I also like how the word Olympics is just a synonym for.
Have you heard of this? The Pentathon?
No.
Okay, this is a real.
I believe
sport.
it's forbidden in the book of Leviticus. So.
This is a sport that combines horse racing,
Oh, yes.
running, swimming, fencing, and shooting.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That is
No.
odd.
I was really disappointed to hear that those weren't happening all at the same time.
Okay, yeah. I was going to say, I already know how to boost the
'Cause I
viewer
was
attendance
thinking-
on this thing right
In my
now.
mind, I was thinking
Yep.
horse, sword in one hand,
Yeah,
gun
hoof.
in the other.
That's right. Yeah, riding the horse,
The
sword and gun.
The sport invented by Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
and you're chasing down another man who's running.
Right.
That's the racing component.
thought-
Is he fast enough?
And then it's done in water, like
And then,
a shallow
that's right.
river.
And he can escape into the
But
river. Yeah.
Turns out it's one thing, and then you do the rest of them.
That would be a great Olympics.
Yeah.
Do a Manhunter Olympics. Do that. Do Hunger Games Olympics. Come on.
Just do Hunger Games.
Just do Hunger Games. You know what? I'm ready. Sign up dystopian futures. That's better for TV audiences.
don't worry, we're headed down that path.
Yeah. We'll get
We're
there
already
soon
done.
enough. I'm just saying, the Olympics lacks a lot of blood, okay? Could have a lot more lethality to it. Keep my attention. All right, let's do some therapy. Emotionally distant father. Hi, guys. This is something I've been working on a bit, but I thought I'd see if you have any wisdom to share on the subject. I love my father. I think he genuinely cares about me and my family, but I can't help but feel he's not emotionally open or available to us, or anyone else in his life for that matter. I spoke with my mother, and she agrees. I've not brought up the subject with my brothers. For context, I am a 25-year-old male. My parents are in their 50s. I have a brother around my age and another one significantly younger. For example, most days at dinner, his conversations with us would revolve around, "What did you do today?" or "Did the little brother go to piano class?" etc. And when that's answered, he'd just say, "Oh," and that'd be the end of it. I try to encourage conversation by adding to answers like, "Yes, he did. He learned a new song and was really excited. He'll play it for you after dinner." And all Dad would say is something like, "Sure." I want to be clear, I don't feel emotionally neglected by this. I have my support elsewhere, and I don't resent him. As I said, he does care. That said, I feel this kind of emotional distance makes it difficult for him to open up to me, and I worry that he might be torturing himself with issues he's not quite equipped to speak about, and that I, or other members of the family, might be able to help if he feels safer emotionally around us. The emotional distance also has been hard on my mother from time to time. I've been trying to get him to open up emotionally, slowly, spending time alone with him, trying to tease out some more difficult emotional subjects, and I think he responds to that, but it's been slow going. Mother's been considering going to couples counseling with him, but hasn't brought it up yet. I'm wondering if you guys have any tips. As I'm getting older now, I think I'd like to help my parents out if I can. Thanks in advance, Anonymous. That's a
Okay.
good one.
Before someone tweets it, the U.S. does have the most athletes participating in the Olympics this year.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Followed by
Don't
Japan.
add us. Don't
Yeah.
add us, Tokyo.
No, we're going to get added anyway.
Yeah.
I think
People are coming for you guys.
Yeah.
We took a
So
hard
sick
line
of
on the
it.
Olympics.
Country of Tokyo.
a random
Shut
hard
up.
line on the Olympics.
Yeah.
Actually, Ryder, tell your dad not to take hard lines on the Olympics.
That's a good start piece of advice. That's just perennial wisdom right there.
Yeah, just
That's
don't do that.
evergreen.
It's fine. The Olympics are fine.
This is the hill I die
All
on.
right. So I guess one thing I'm kind of wondering is this a new development that he seems emotionally distant, or has he always just kind of been this way?
Kind of get the impression it's long term.
That's what I'm thinking too. In which case, I feel like you're better off keeping the focus on you and how you come to terms with that, as opposed to try to draw something out of him that's unnatural.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's my take on that.
Yeah.
I would focus more on how can you adapt to how he is,
Right.
and how can you kind of learn his love language, so to speak.
Sure.
How does he show affection? And put more emphasis, put more stock in that,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to trying to draw out something, because if it's unnatural for him, the harder you pull to get something out, I feel like the more he's going to resist that. And it sounds like you've tried some things and it kind of works, so maybe you can continue doing that.
Mm.
I just feel like your concern, I get your concern that that you're afraid that he's holding things in emotionally.
Right. Because, yeah, the
But if
writer
you
says
don't-
he's not neglectful.
Right,
It's not like he's a bad
right,
dad.
right,
I just
right.
worry about my dad, is what
Sure,
the writer's saying.
Sure. But that's for him to worry about.
Sure.
And if he has a mechanism in place for how he deals with his emotions,
Yeah.
as long as they're not causing harm, I would let him do that his way.
Sure.
I feel like because this is the thing sometimes I see, and sometimes it makes me a little cringy and uneasy, is when I see people say, well, they're quiet or they're emotionally distant, therefore they're dealing with something. We got to try to get it out of them.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Well,
good
no,
point.
you don't.
Right.
You don't. Because it's possible that you're wrong. It's possible
Yeah.
that maybe they're not dealing with anything.
Sure.
And by you trying to get something out that isn't there,
Right.
you're actually doing damage and not really helping.
Right. They could be just fine.
Right.
Just
Or at
not
the very least, you
expressive.
could damage that relationship.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess, I would just always kind of go back to, if it's working, then maybe we don't need to mess with it.
Sure.
If it's broke, then maybe we can look at it. But if it's not broke, then let's not fix it.
So I'll kind of do. I think I agree with all that. I'll add a little bit from another alternate possibility. So let's assume. So first off, Nick's right. Just because somebody's quiet or to themselves or not very emotionally expressive or contemplative does not inherently mean that bad things are happening in them. Some people are actually doing their own emotional care, whatever level that looks like for them. They're just not needing to be very expressive. Now, having said that, I do want to say a few things on this topic that I think are really relevant. So I think there is and we've talked about this in very deep episodes of the show long ago, but there is a distinct risk these days for men, middle-aged men, age 30 to about 55. We're seeing a lot of spikes for danger things like substance abuse, depression, anxiety, and we're seeing that there's not a lot of access of care. So I think that as we read this question out loud, there's a lot of folks who hear some of this and kind of nod their heads and go, yeah, I have a man in my life, that I'm concerned about too. I relate to this writer being concerned for this 50-something-year-old father and wanting to help. And so I want to speak to that from that angle with the assumption that maybe there is something going on, and what kind of coaching could we give you on this? So this one's really near and dear to me, and it really hits me kind of in a recency thing. In the recent past, this month as we record this, I had a patient who passed away. And I had been working with him for about 3 years, and he was in his early 50s. And this guy was very reluctant to come to therapy. He did it at the insistence of a family member. And basically, from all the stress in his life and the difficulties that he had survived and the difficult things he was going through, he had developed really unhealthy coping skills. But he was just one of these rub some dirt on it kind of guys. Get up every day, tie on your work boots, and keep going. Take care of your family. Don't complain. So it was really hard as a therapist to get him to open up to me and to talk to me about his suffering, to talk to me about his disappointments. Because whenever when he just barely cracked that door, he'd dismiss it with a wave and say, it is what it is, Jim. I'm not going to sit here and bellyache about it. That doesn't do any damn good. And I try to tell him, like, no, this is therapy. I want you to ruminate on that. I want you to unpack that. I am interested in what your opinions are and what your difficulties are and what your hurts are. But he had just been very conditioned by culture to say, dismissively wave at that and then do whatever you have to do, as a man to just cope and get through it. Well, the life that he was living to cope and get through it ultimately ended his life. And it was one of those things that I believe could have been prevented. It was obvious that it could be prevented. But as his therapist, I struggled for years to get him to open up, even though he would show up to therapy. He would pay money to go to therapy. He believed in the concept. He would admit that he liked it. But it was a very slow-going process. And Ryder, I relate to you where you talk about how you've just tried to be kind of friendly and keep it superficial in the beginning. I'll tell you, as a therapist who often works with men and maybe men that are closed off, that's my approach. And that comes out of motivational interviewing, which is a technique that has to do with how do you break the ice, thaw that out, help people start noticing change and become willing to share and open up about it. It is usually a casual thing. You do usually start on the surface. And just becoming present with somebody and getting them to jabber with you about anything at all, even if it's just sports or other stuff, that usually opens the door to a human becoming more expressive. Now, having said that, I don't think there's anything you, Ryder, can do that would actually, if your father needed to become more emotionally open, I don't think there's anything you could do. Here's why. You're his 25-year-old son. And I think that's a different relational dynamic, right? How he speaks to his wife is going to be different than how he speaks to his 25-year-old son. How my patient spoke to me, the therapist, was different than how he spoke to his adult children or his spouse. Over the years that I worked with him, I became the one person that he would open up to what little he would. It was always very strenuous. But what little he could was something we were able to achieve together because I didn't have any other identity in his life. If I was his son, it would probably be very hard and some would argue maybe inappropriate for him to become emotionally vulnerable and open up about everything. And that might be something he'll never be comfortable with. Regardless if he ever does become able to open up emotionally, it might not be to you. So the thing that I hear in this letter that I think has the most promise is where mom is saying, hey, maybe we'll start going to see a couples counselor just for us, just to, tune up our relationship. For a lot of people that might be a little bit resistant to therapy or emotionally inexpressive, going with other people for more than just looking at me is a lot more inviting. Because then it can be like, oh, we're here to talk about our marriage. I can talk about our marriage. I can talk about our kids. I can talk about these other things that are not me things. They're otherness aspects to them. That sometimes is much more approachable. So I love that. I think that's it. But I also don't want you to bang that drum too hard, Ryder, because honestly, even if you were really good at it, even if you were a professional therapist, I don't know that they could open up to you because that your inherent dynamic is that you're their child.
Well, and I think one of the big issues, the big differences between from what we understand, from what the writer's situation is and your client that you had, was that your client had observable issues that were going on that drove him to therapy.
Good point. Yes.
And this
goes back
individual,
to your point.
right? And this individual, we don't really see that.
Yeah.
But if your dad is open to couples counseling, I think that's a great idea because then that at least opens that door, like you said.
Couples therapy has been a triage for many people to land themselves in individual therapy.
Yes.
Because they walk in and say, yep, I don't mind talking about our relationship. That's fine. That's easy. You talk about the family. And then over time, the therapist might notice some clues and ask some deeper, more probing questions. Usually they've had a good rapport with the patient, and the patient will say, yeah, I guess I do that a lot. Yeah, I guess I have had that problem sometimes. And that's where the therapist will say, hey, John Doe, you ever feel like talking one-on-one? I'd love to ask you more about that if you're ever open to it. And a lot of times that'll turn into something. They'll go, yeah, sure, Jim, okay. Yeah, maybe I'll take you up on that. I guess I wouldn't mind if it helps the couples work. Yep. And I'll go, yes, it would. And then you never know where that'll lead. But you have a good heart, writer, and I'm glad that you care so much about your family. But, just be careful, my friend. Don't overburden yourself. We don't want you to drift into that codependency lane where you feel like somehow you've got the ability to cure this or control this, or that we're overly reading problems into somebody else when maybe there isn't any, But it's okay to worry about your father. I think that comes from a very loving place. Encourage the couples therapy thing. I think that's a good path forward.
Agree.
Great letter. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're talking about anxiety medication. Ooh, I love this topic. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
Today's episode
From Tokyo
is brought to you by Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Dawn, Scott Jameson, Richard Macy, and Lord Colin Stewart. If you'd like to sponsor the show, become a therapy producer at patreon.com/therapy. This week's trivia theme in honor of our therapy producers is Name That Continent.
Oh, God.
How many continents are there, Jim?
All right, there's Pampers, I think makes an adult one. Incontinence? Is that what you said?
Close enough. All right,
2.
I will name the country. You have to name what continent it's on.
All right, I can rule out Antarctica. And I can rule out Australia.
All right.
I'm doing really good.
Here we go. French Guiana.
Oh, fuck. The French thing is
Guiana.
obviously there to screw with me. It's probably a province of France.
If you'd like to join the therapy producers that make the show possible, go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
French Guiana?
Yep.
Are you sure it's not Guinea?
Yes.
French Guiana.
Yes.
So that implies that there's other Guianas. There's a French Guiana, and then perhaps maybe an Italian Guiana, or South Asian Guiana, right?
Yeah. Yeah. East German Guiana.
East German
Yeah.
Guiana.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I am going to hedge my bets on this one. All right. If I said Europe, I think everybody's just going to scream through their speakers because that's clearly the decoy. Like, throwing French on this thing.
Oh, okay. I see. what you're
clearly
saying.
was
I
to
thought you were
draw
gonna
me
say
to.
that wasn't a continent. I was like,
No.
it's
I think it still
It's going to
is.
be a lot harder than I thought.
Earth. You're doing great, buddy. So, okay, I'm going to rule out Europe. I'm going to guess it has to do with something colonizing. So France probably went somewhere, took over some shit, and then started calling it French, that thing. Guyana? Guyana that doesn't sound like Africa. But it's not going to be Asia. So it's going to be South America, or it's going to be Africa. Or it's going to be Europe. Fuck.
Or it could be Antarctica.
Yeah, you don't want to rule out the penguin zone. All right, I'm going with Africa.
Okay.
Africa.
Is it my turn now?
Go for it.
It's South America.
It's South America.
It is?
Yes.
How do you say that with confidence?
Because I know where
that's
French
where it
Guiana
is.
is.
Shut up. You've never even heard of French Guiana. That's not a thing.
I'm not great at geography. I happen to know where French Guiana is.
Bullshit. I've never in my life even heard of
I think
French
it's on
Guiana.
kind of the northeast corner of South America.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, northeast. Yeah.
Yeah, like northeast generally.
You know,
Not that South
Borders,
America has corners, but
Borders
it's,
Brazil.
Risk
Yeah.
did a horrible job of preparing me for this because I know of 4 countries.
If you know your geography from Risk.
that is
then
where I know my
arguably your
geography.
parents are
Yes.
the ones who did a horrible job.
and the Nevada educational system, I'll add, and
Yes.
Liberty University.
That was your geography class.
yeah, was
Risk?
just playing Risk.
Yeah.
Yeah. According to Risk, there's 4 countries in South America. There's Chile, Argentina, Brazil, and I want to say Papua New Guinea.
Rest of
And
South-
top part
South
that
America.
touches Mexico.
Right.
All right. So French Guiana, part of South America.
Correct.
Good for you, French Guiana. Maybe drop the French. Maybe be independent Guiana or South American Guiana. Huh?
That's the other thing too is when you hear another name, like another country's name in front of the name of a
Yeah.
country, a lot of times that's South America.
Okay. I'll keep that in
A lot of
mind.
people came over and colonized bits of South America.
And they just named it after whatever. All right. Like New England, like that,
For instance,
for instance.
where
Yes.
is
there you
where
go.
what continent is New England on?
Not where Old England is, I'll tell you that right now.
Are you sure?
I'm confident. That would just be redundant. Who would do that?
It's
We
in-
left Plymouth and
it's in-
landed in Plymouth.
It's in New Europe.
Yeah, basically. You're not wrong. All right, anxiety medication. Hey guys, I found you recently and I love the show. I've been in therapy for around a year now. I originally went to therapy years and years ago because I'd had depression and I'd struggled to get out of it. I found myself not wanting to be alive anymore, and I just felt incredibly empty and alone. I was unable to speak to my friends and family about it, not because they wouldn't have been supportive, but just because I struggle with speaking about my feelings. And so, by the time it got really bad, I felt it was too late to try and tell people, that they wouldn't believe me because I had been pretending. I think fairly well someone gave me an Oscar that I was all good. I had a few sessions with a therapist, but I didn't really like him, so I stopped going. But it was useful because I explained that I felt anxious all the time for as long as I could remember. I often had panic attacks, and every day was full of anxiety. What I felt anxious about changes daily. It's just a constant state of being. He diagnosed me with something called general anxiety disorder. This made sense to me when I looked into it. I thought, yeah, that's me. So anyway, found my current therapist and have stuck with her. She's great, and I've learned a lot about myself, the way I interact with others, and have found my sessions to be useful and worthwhile. However, we've never really talked about my anxiety or mental health. I've always found that a bit odd. Instead, we focused on past traumas, things going on in my life, expressing my opinions, etc., etc. But we've never, ever barred me from mentioning my anxiety and GAD in my first session, talked about my anxiety, despite the fact that this is something that affects me every day. My anxiety had felt manageable over the past year. Few rough patches, but okay. To put in perspective how anxiety affects my life, I don't have any friends anymore. I rarely leave the house. My job is remote. And I live alone with my 2 dogs. The only people I tend to speak to each week is my therapist and my mother. It clearly really does affect my life, but it's been this way for years, so that, to me, it's manageable. I'm currently really struggling with my anxiety. I'm having panic attacks when just walking the dog. I'm crying in the supermarket because it's too busy and I'm too anxious. I'm crying at home because I feel scared and anxious about everything. It's basically feeling too much right now. I'm a bit overwhelmed and I'm beginning to think I might like to try medication. I'm desperate to not feel anxious or at least experience far less of it. I'm also aware that in tandem with the anxiety, my depression feels like it's seeping back into my life. I don't feel sad, but that good old numbness is appearing, and today I found myself panicking walking by the road that a bus might careen off and hit me, and then thinking, that might not be so bad. I feel like now might be a good time to try some medication, but I'm scared to talk to my therapist about it. Because we rarely talk about my anxiety, I'm worried she won't think I need it, or won't take me seriously. But I'm also too scared to just cut her out and go to my doctor in case that's a rude thing to do. Help! Also, sorry this is super long. Feel free to cut it down. Thanks, XXX. Triple X! Vin Diesel's a fan of the show. That's nice.
Yeah, so I was just rereading a couple parts of this. So I don't think anxiety medication would be a bad idea.
Yeah.
I would hope your therapist would be open to that. I mean, your therapist is going to probably have to make a referral to a psychiatrist or some sort of MD to prescribe it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't think that would be a bad idea at all. Most anxiety is treated with medication anyway.
Usually,
right?
yeah,
I mean,
part of
it's
it.
pretty common.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about this writer not having shared about anxiety with the therapist and now being afraid that if they do, the therapist is not going to believe them?
No. What
Was it that they haven't
They
shared with the
did share
therapist?
it.
Or
With
that they
this
just,
particular therapist, they said, I only brought it up during the intake session.
Yes.
I've never talked about it since.
Right,
Well,
so they
I'm
have
scared
shared.
to tell the therapist now because I think they'll think I'm pretending.
No, I think what the writer was saying was the writer is saying they're surprised that the therapist continues focusing on other things.
That's how I interpreted it.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
got the impression that they
No.
haven't talked about it.
No, the writer says, I brought it up, barring mention of my anxiety and GAD in my first session, has not talked about anxiety at all.
Yeah, we haven't talked about it. It hasn't come up. I told during my first session. Right. The impression I'm getting here is that the writer is not discussing it for one reason or another, and confirms that at the end by saying, I want to talk to my therapist about this, but I'm afraid because we rarely talk about my anxiety, I'm worried she won't think I need it or take me seriously. Yeah. So
Well,
the
let's answer
impression
it both
is-
ways.
Yeah. Okay.
The correct way that Jacob and I had it.
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
your
And then the
interpretation.
mistaken way that I think. Go ahead.
If it is, if it,
I just drooled Red Bull all over my shirt,
Jim's developed a drinking problem.
just like an airplane.
Yeah. Okay, so if it's something that you're surprised that your therapist hasn't brought it up and that your therapist is focusing on all these other things, you have a right to bring that up in therapy.
Yeah.
If that's the case, I think you have the right to say, "Hey, you know what? This is affecting me." And I think your therapist wants to know that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if there's something going on, if you're having panic attacks while walking the dog, you're breaking down in the grocery store because it's too overwhelming, I think your therapist wants to know that information.
Oh yeah.
So definitely bring that up. And if you feel like you need to be focusing on that more than other issues, express that. Definitely bring that up.
Yeah.
General announcement that we've made before that we'll make again now. Tell your therapist things.
Yeah. Don't.
Don't be concerned about telling your therapist things. They're there for you to tell them things.
Right. Yeah.
Just tell them things.
That's
It's fine.
key. That's key. So let's do a little bit of a deep dive into this. So I think a lot of people. So first off, writer, anxiety is the most common mental illness in America, and anxiety medications are the most common prescribed psychiatric medication in America. So you're in good company. And the really good news is that medicines that treat anxiety are extremely effective, A, and B, quite mild compared to the rest of the pantheon of psychopharmacology. So I'm going to tell you a couple of meds that I want you to hear about because I think it's very common kind of first line care. So the very first thing for you and for all listeners, if you are feeling panic attacks, if you are having anxiety, everything that this writer describes, we don't diagnose on this show, but these sound consistent with the writer's diagnosis of GAD, generalized anxiety disorder. There are some agoraphobic traits, fear of going to the supermarket, fear of being exposed into, unsafe places, wanting to stay home. At some point that can become a little bit regressive. That can be agoraphobic as a trait, doesn't mean it's a new diagnosis. So if you relate to anything the writer's talking about, especially the double trouble of the depression starting to creep into, very common that some of the same cognitive distorted patterns that lead to anxiety may be adjacent to depression, and the writers talked about having a history of depression, wanting to get ahead of it. So let's talk a little bit about medicine. So if you're out there and you're like, man, I think I might want to be on anti-anxiety meds, this sounds important. Of course, the first thing we always tell you is get to your therapist, start a conversation there, right? And this writer's already doing that. And of course, our first nudge is, hey, however we're interpreting your letter, at the end of the day, anxiety is not being discussed. That data is not coming out fluidly, and there's not a full account of what you're going through to the therapist notes. The therapist does need to know this, because I think this would be very relevant. They would probably recommend medicine at this point. And so how does a person go about doing that? A lot of people think you have to go to a therapist first to get medicine. In fact, the vast majority of the time, it works the opposite way. The vast majority of the time, people go to their regular general clinic, whatever their primary doctor is, and they tell that doctor about what they're going through. Those doctors and nurses usually have a very short screening tool that they'll use. They'll ask you some questions, and then based on that, they'll qualify you for basic medicines. What will they usually start off with? Usually at the primary care clinic level, they're going to start with a couple of things. First, they're usually going to start with either an SSRI or an SNRI. So those are slightly different, but they're both among the classes of medicines that have been the most tested in all of psychopharmacology. They're generally quite mild, so mild that they take usually 2 to 3 weeks of taking them every single day to work. And what those kinds of meds do, like SSRIs, you'll probably be prescribed something like Prozac, or perhaps Zoloft, or the generic sertraline, something to that effect. And those are SSRIs. And what those are, SSRI, and we've talked about this on the show before, but we're time for this again, we're due. SSRIs are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Serotonin is something your brain makes. It's a neurotransmitter. And it has effects on the way that you live, the way that you think. When that chemical is saturating inside of your brain, it has a calming effect, and it tends to, kind of dull down anxiousness and increase, pleasure and joy, not to a euphoric level, but, kind of staving away things like despair and hopelessness. So what SSRI medicines do is essentially imagine that there's like a little dripping sink in your brain, and that sink is dripping the neurotransmitter serotonin. What these medicines do is they kind of clog up the sink. They don't necessarily add serotonin. They don't have serotonin in them. They inhibit, the I part of SSRI, the reuptake, the R part, of the serotonin. And what that looks like is like jamming up the little drain in the sink and allowing your own serotonin to build up to a therapeutic level. And it takes weeks for that to even work, but the net effect of that is that people will tend to report that they have fewer and less depressive or anxious symptoms and fewer and less depressive symptoms. But this may not be all that you're offered the first time you go to a doctor. Part of the reason why is because you're also describing very acute panic attacks. And when the doctor hears that, or the psychiatrist, they're probably going to say, hey, let's get you an SSRI, which is going to work over the next 2 or 3 weeks, and I want you to take that every day. But they're probably going to offer you something that's more of a PRN, something you should take when you're feeling the attack. Now, that could be something in the benzodiazepine class. That could be something like clonazepam or Xanax. You've probably heard of Xanax before. And those things work by essentially just binding with the sympathetic nervous system and turning off the emergency alarm that the panic attack is having in your body. And they're very soothing. They work very quickly. They're also narcotic, and they can be abused. And so some doctors, especially if they're not a psychiatrist, they might not offer that right away. What they might offer instead is something like hydroxyzine. Hydroxyzine is a non-narcotic. It's basically diphenhydramine, which is Benadryl. So it's like super Benadryl. It'll make you tired. It'll make you groggy. It'll clear up your sinuses real good. You'll breathe real good. And if you have any allergic stuff going on, it'll knock that the hell out of your system.
Helps if you're around cats.
Helps, yeah, definitely helps if you have cats at home and you can't live with them. Make you a little bit groggy, but it works. It works in 15 to 20 minutes, and it immediately sort of attacks the panic and kind of disentangles that cycle. So there's some examples of medicines that your primary doc might prescribe to you. If your primary doc is comfortable at this level, which they usually are at anxiety levels and the depression level that you're describing, if they know that you have a therapist, they might not bump your case up at all. They may say, hey, I'm going to stick around as your prescriber on these meds. These are within my scope. I'm comfortable with it. Keep seeing your therapist and open up some communication between me and the therapist so that if you're in danger, we can talk to each other. That's usually all you need. And that's usually the therapist needs to know what meds you're on because they're the ones that are going to see you more regularly. And even though therapists do not prescribe, we're trained in psychopharmacology enough to know what to monitor for, to be tracking your symptoms, to be telling you and giving you guidance as far as things we think you should go back and rediscuss with your doctor. And we'll also, most therapists, I won't speak for everybody, most of us are comfortable giving you recommendations. But we always, tell you, hey, listen, we stay in our lane. We're not a scripter. You always get to defer to the doc. But a lot of times, especially primary care docs, they generally will go with whatever our recommendation is because they don't specialize in mental health and because these are pretty generic things. Like when you're talking about SSRIs or hydroxyzine, these are very dangerous things. These are very placid things. They're ubiquitous. They're given out all the time. They're easy to wean off of. If you dig down to the internet, you'll find somebody that had a bad day on these things, but you'll find that about Tylenol too. So generally, that's the way that I'd prescribe it, that you go forward. I would tell you, A, tell your therapist everything you told us, and then B, go to your primary doc, have the same conversation, and ask if they think that it would be a good idea to start you on a low dose SSRI or SNRI. Again, that's not Jim giving real strong guidance. That is just what they're going to reach for. That's what's indicated. That's what everybody reaches for to start with at square one. And that would be a good thing for you, I think. So, again, we don't diagnose on this show. Everything we talk about is educational in nature. I am educating you about medicinal options and encouraging you to follow up with your correct prescriber who will assess you accurately and make medical diagnoses and prescriptions that follow exactly what you need. So, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you about things you asked about.
Yeah, one of the last things that you said in here in this email was that you don't want to just go to your doctor and kind of step around your therapist because it would be a rude thing to do. I think more importantly than it being a rude thing to do would just be that it'd be less effective. Yeah. If all of your helpers get to communicate and can talk to each other, it's way more effective.
And that doesn't always mean that we will, because this
Right,
does
right.
still sound like
Yeah.
a very mild case.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, for me as a therapist, if I'm your doc and you come to me and you go, yeah, man, I just wanted to let you know, I went and saw my doctor. He scripted me these meds. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I wouldn't be offended in any way, shape, or form. I would just say, hey, thanks for the update.
Yeah.
And then my next question would be, when did you start the meds? Just so I know, so I can follow the expectations of where your body should be. And then I would just ask probing questions about how you're feeling, what changes we're noticing, and then give you any coaching I can about how to use the meds effectively, because sometimes the docs don't offer a lot of coaching with it. They just give them to you and trust that you'll ask the pharmacist about it, where a therapist has just done a lot more hands-on stuff, so we can usually help you. But no, we're not in competition with these guys. We're all part of the same team.
Yep.
And that's not our lane. We also do not feel qualified to tell you, yes, you need meds, or no, you don't. We can strongly recommend that you consult with a physician to get a second opinion about meds, but it's really outside of our scope to even speak strongly about them, so it's entirely appropriate to step around us and go straight to your doctor, with the exception being if you have an addictions history.
Yeah.
If you have an addictions history, and then you're like, yeah, I just need some Xanax. This isn't your bag, Nick. Stay off my back. I'm going to go talk to my doctor.
That's my bag.
Yeah, you're going to get a foot up your ass
That's my
real
bag.
soon. Yeah, we've had a lot of people try that. Don't do that.
Nick will give you a bag of Xanax.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying.
That's my bag of Xanax. Don't you go to him. I got them wholesale prices, baby. Great question, though, and I think a lot of people relate to this. Remember, guys, if you're out there and you think that you'd benefit from this, that is entirely okay. Medicine is tools, and it's part of mental health. It's very, very common. Go to your local doctor, bring these things up. They'll ask some questions, and they'll probably want to start you off on some kind of low-dose SSRI. Those are not forever medicines. Very common. Lots of people have been on them. I've been on them. So, they definitely have a role to play. Great question.
Yeah.
So we'll take another break and learn about geography. When we come back, we are discovering our own relationship needs. You're listening to Pod Therapy After Dark.
Today's episode is brought to you by Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Benton, Scott Jameson, Richard Macy, and Lord Colin Stewart. Would you like to sponsor the show? Become a therapy producer at patreon.com/therapy. Our second geography question. Name that continent. Here's the country. The country is Suriname.
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 So that's like Vietnam. It's probably
If you'd like to
South
join the
Vietnam.
therapy producers and make the show possible, go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
All right. My brain is telling me you're going to find Suriname near Vietnam.
Okay.
I'm saying somewhere in the Polynesian Islands. Micronesia. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the continent of Micronesia.
Yeah, the thing. The stretched out watery land that's between
Ocean?
Australia. Yeah, that thing. The big wet thing.
Wait,
It's like a glass of water, but like huge.
Like really
It's
big.
Like a huge
Like
glass of
I'm
water.
telling you, there's fucking huge fish in this thing.
is your guess none of the above on this one?
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a damn good point. You know what?
Like, I would like to go for option H.
Yeah.
None of the above.
Yeah. If Nick really wanted to get ahead on this one, he should have picked like a territory that's already been named on Mars. That would have been really smart.
No.
But no.
Yeah, Nick.
He didn't do it.
Do smart
You know
things.
Yeah.
You know what? I've discovered I don't need to do that on this show.
You don't need to put it on another
I don't
planet.
have to put
Just say Suriname.
I can just put it right where it is.
Well, okay, but this is where I get confused, because then I think if you're like in that string of islands off a coast, are you Asia or are you technically Australia? Because when you think the continent of Australia, you think, oh, there's only one country, it's Australia. But I'll bet you, like New Guinea, like isn't that called New Guinea? What's
There's
the
a
thing?
place called New Guinea, yes.
Is that the place next to Australia where the farming is?
New Zealand?
That one. I'll bet you New Zealand is technically part of the continent of Australia. Like if you were classifying it.
You want me to help you out?
Yeah, sure. I'll take it.
It's not an island.
Okay. I just lost a lot of my hypothesis.
Yeah.
I had a really strong direction I, was working
and,
through.
And I was going to let you go down there for a little
So
bit.
it's land based.
It's-
It's right there on a continent.
Yeah.
I'm going with South Vietnam, Suriname. So
Right.
shit, where's
still,
Vietnam?
Still looking for a continent.
This is what I was waiting on, to see if Jim knew what continent Vietnam was on.
I mean, it feels like it's Asian, doesn't it? Doesn't it feel like it's Asian? Or is
Sure
it?
does.
Yeah, it's Asian, right? It's Asia. I'm going with Asia.
So you're going with Asia.
Suriname is South Vietnam, which is part of Asia. Actually, yeah, isn't Vietnam near the Koreas? I feel like it's near
Kind
the
of, yeah.
Koreas. I'm
Yeah.
going with that. It's Asia. Final answer.
Great. Africa.
He's just trying to be different.
My guess was Asia.
Uh,
I don't know.
It sounds like Asia.
Yeah.
It is South America.
There we go.
Fuck? Are you kidding me?
Suriname borders French Guiana
Jesus
Nice.
Christ.
and Brazil.
Oh my God.
Well done.
I was putting this
Wow.
together. It's like, I don't need this whole map.
Oh,
I just need this little area.
I'll just pick these two.
Right
He ain't
next to
gonna
each
know
other.
either of these. Oh my God. So the real question is, how many aneurysms has Manu suffered listening to this segment?
I'm sure she's stopped by now.
If you're in your ambulance on the way to the hospital,
She's
right
on
now,
her fourth tweet.
Yeah,
That's what
Now, how big is Suriname?
tiny.
Yeah.
Tiny. It's like
Jeez. It's like the Rhode Island of South America.
no, it's probably bigger than that. It's probably I don't know. It might be like Delaware, Vermont. size.
Jeez.
Maybe the two of them combined.
Suriname. Yeah, that stumped me. All right, whatever.
Yep.
So I think we've all proven that I don't know, well, really anything, but also geography. Discovering my own relationship needs.
Oh, yeah. Just over 500,000 population.
Oh, that's
Okay.
nothing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's real
That's
small.
little.
That's very
Yeah.
small.
Well, it is right next door to French Guiana.
Yeah.
Just, it's landlocked, Jim.
Oh, so yeah. But I mean, I wonder how many miles away from Vietnam, because I'm sure that they've traded or something, Obviously,
I'm sure they share some sort of common
cultural.
culture.
Yeah. That's you don't just end up with Nam, in your name without having something to do. Hey guys, I've been in a long-term committed relationship for 6 years. Recently, my partner and I have been in conflict over whether or not we both want or need the same things in life, or if our desires are at least complementary. We decided to go to counseling and talk about these issues, and we've both been trying to think about what we want or need before our first session. The problem is, I have no idea what I want or need. I've spent so long people-pleasing others that I've never considered myself and what I want, and now don't know how to even think about it. So, how do I identify my wants and needs? Anonymous. That's a good one.
That's a really good question.
Yeah, when you've spent so long people pleasing, focusing on others, now you're getting ready to go to couples counseling, and you need to be prepared with an ask, right? You need to be able to come in there and say, "Here's what I need," and you don't even know how to answer that question.
I think you don't even need to know that to go into couples counseling. I
Mhm.
think
That's my answer.
yeah, I think I don't know is a perfectly good answer.
Good point.
Because it's honest.
yeah.
The best answer is the honest answer.
Well, yeah, and I would say, I think if you're that couple and you sit down, and here's how it usually goes. If you haven't been your first session yet, when you go to couples counseling,
We've got a long queue.
yeah,
They've been to their first
they've been to
session.
their first session. So if you're out there and you're like, we're going to go to couples counseling, what's it like? I had a new intake session today with couples. So usually the first step is the therapist just wants to know, what's the big picture? What recently happened that brought you here? Nobody ever shows up to couples counseling because they're on a winning streak. Usually something recently has happened.
You don't
You've
think
made
so?
a decision. Very rare.
People don't go in there just to brag
just to
about
brag
how
about
good their
how great it's
relationship is.
We're just here because we're having sex every day.
We got to tell somebody.
We gotta tell somebody about it. It's just getting weird. We needed a break. We're here for Gatorade and to rest. Yeah. So typically you walk in and we say, "Hey, what's going on? What started this? What's the recent history?" We like to learn about the history of the relationship. Okay, you guys been together 6 years. How'd you meet? Tell me about the road that's taken you here. When did things start to kind of tear and sift away? So that's the basics. We just want to understand your history and what's going on. When we ask you what you want, we're not going to frame it in sort of that individualized way very often. We're usually going to assume you have thoughts about the relationship, and you kind of said them in the letter. You're probably going to say, "I guess we're here." When the therapist says, "Why are you here? What do you want to get out of therapy?" I would imagine your answer might sound something like, "I want to identify whether or not we are compatible," right? You talked about having non-complementary views of life, non-complementary paths forward. You're feeling like you guys are drifting apart. You want different things. You have different values. So I think what you're doing is showing up to discuss and discover what each of your values are and whether or not you guys are compatible. And if you were to be compatible, if you wanted to keep going, I mean, you've already invested 6 years. If you want to continue going, what would the therapist recommend to make things work well so that you guys are both authentic, you're both living your future lives, you're heading in the right directions, but doing it together? Or therapy might reveal incompatible differences of opinion. You know, one of you might say, I've had this. I've had a couple come in where one of them says, I absolutely positively want to have a child. And the other one will say, I absolutely positively will not do that. And they'll debate about whether they've talked about this before or whose opinion has changed. And usually one of their opinions has changed. But here they are, you know, and they need to be authentic that this is how they feel. And, you know, they're invested. And
By the way, have that conversation before you get married.
if you can.
Please have that conversation.
Yeah, discuss it early and often. But yeah, that'll happen. And then as a therapist, you're there and saying, okay, how do I, you know, broker a conversation about what people are open to, explore their authentic feelings, get to a place where you guys are having hard talks in a supervised way that are productive? That's couples therapy.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's it. So you don't necessarily have to have your own private agenda of things that you want.
Well, and it's interesting too, because there's relationship needs, and then you've got your individual needs, right? I'm thinking about this, you know, having been in a relationship for 6 years. So I was in a relationship for 10. And if somebody asked me at some point in that, what are my relationship needs? I would have a tough time answering that. But I sure as hell would have had a really difficult time answering what are my individual needs.
Okay.
Because when you're in a relationship for that long, you kind of forget that you even have individual needs.
Oh, yeah.
You don't really think about it, you know, and then the relationship is over, and then you're like, oh shit, I better figure this out.
Right.
Because now I am an individual.
Right.
you gotta know, and it takes a little bit you kind of have to be thrown in that position, in that situation. But yeah, it's a tough one to answer. I mean, I'm just trying to answer it now, like what
How do I
need.
identify my wants and needs?
My individual, like what I need, and then what do I need from the relationship?
I think about it in two pieces. Whenever I've done couples work that wants to explore some of what this question is asking, the two exercises that I'll usually roll out, one of them is an exploration of your relational needs. So why do you like relationship? What do you get out of relationship? What makes you happy in relationship? That's important. And I want that discussion to exist between the partners because hopefully there is a transactional component to this relationship, that we are meeting each other's needs. That's one type of need. The second thing about my own wants and needs and life direction, that's something that I usually do called a values inventory. And I've mentioned it before on the show. And I just did that with a couple today where we sit down and I have each member of the couple do this whole inventory of identifying things that are really important to them about what it means to live a meaningful life. And that could have any number of things on it. You'll hear words like financial security, travel, adventure, beautiful home. The three of us actually ended up doing a values inventory. There's an episode back in the day where we all did like a top 3 of that list or whatever.
When the three of us were thinking about getting married?
Yeah, when we did that throuple thing for a while, whenever it was like really popular and we didn't want to miss out on it.
Right.
So I think that's a discussion of personal needs and personal wants. And I think that is an interesting exercise for kind of finding yours and identifying things that are still important to you, even if you can't think of those things off the top of your head. So values inventory could be a good way to explore that space and notice what matters to you. Could be.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great place to start. But I wouldn't feel pressured to have to come up with something.
No.
I think I mean that's part of what couples counseling is going to be about, is exploring that.
Yes. So. And I like your sense of insight that you're aware of like your own pattern of people pleasing and not really doing a lot of self-evaluation or analysis of what is missing or, you know, whether your cup has anything in it. I like that you're aware. I would hope that comes up. I would hope that you share that with the therapist, because I think the therapist is going to hear that and want to advocate for you and bring that into the conversation and kind of feed back to you a bunch to make sure that you're not being ignored, you know, because it sounds like your natural dynamic is just to passively go along so that the other person's happy. And then if there's no drama, you're happy. But a therapist wants to do a more thorough job than that.
Right.
Not just end the conflict.
And lastly, I would just say, don't think that there's something wrong with you because you hadn't been able to think of anything.
Sure. Yeah, not at all.
I think
No.
that's normal. I think a lot of people would struggle answering that question. And
Yes.
for the exact same reason that you're having trouble answering that question. So don't think that your relationship is doomed, or that you're doing something wrong, or that this is abnormal. I think this is pretty common.
Yes, absolutely. Very, very common. So great question. And above all, glad you're going. Glad you're going to the couples work.
Yeah.
I love hearing that people give it a try, even if they're sure it's not going to work. Go. What? It's a couple $100. Go. Make it a thing. Give it a try. It's worth it. You've invested that much time and energy into somebody.
Yep.
At least couples therapy is sometimes hospice. Sometimes it's just bringing a relationship to a gentle end, and that's okay. And the therapist should be able to identify if that's what needs to happen. So, Great question. Hope you're heading in the right direction. Keep going to therapy. Keep us updated. Let us know. Give us updates about how that process is going for you. Always love to hear how people's therapy experiences are going. All right, we have reached the end of the show, and I want to thank everybody who supports us at patreon.com/therapy. If you go down to patreon.com/therapy and you become a supporter of the show at any level, you can get in there for as cheap as $1. You have access to a ton of archived content. Every show, we usually record 45 minutes to an hour of pre-show content where we do all sorts of stuff.
Sometimes it's even good.
Sometimes it's good. In today's, you can hear Nick pass up on all sorts of Faustian bargains I offered him. You can hear us discuss Nick's alternate career path that he's imagining. I think that there's some good ideas there. And you can always go back and find old interviews that we've done. You'll see all sorts of hashtags in the Patreon of different things that we've launched. Projects, book clubs, movie conversations, rants, lectures, all sorts of interesting side projects that we've put out there.
We had somebody ask about how to search through our episodes for keywords.
At the real show episodes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a way to do that.
Oh, yeah.
As I discovered.
Okay, tell us how you do it, Nick.
Well, you've known how to do this. I just recently figured
I'm just
this
real
out.
proud of you for figuring it out.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I want to hear about your journey.
All right. So that big glass thing in front of you, that's the monitor.
Yeah. There's the light
And you
spilling
go
out
to
of it.
you got the keyboard, and you
Yeah.
got that little mouse.
Yeah,
You grab
yeah.
the mouse,
Yeah,
and you
grab
go to the
that.
website.
That's right.
PodTherapy.net.
Yes, that's the one.
And I believe on the menu there, if you scroll all the way over to the right,
Yes.
there's a magnifying glass.
Yes.
Which apparently means search.
It's a search bar.
Right.
Yeah,
So you
because
can-
it's horizontal.
'cause you can
It's
click
nice.
on that.
That's what you click on.
And then you can put in keywords.
You type whatever you want, and it'll pull up all of our episode history, the entire archive. It will not only search what the titles of the shows were, it'll also search the episode descriptions, I believe.
Oh, okay.
I
That's
hope.
cool.
That's actually pretty hopeful.
Yeah.
So maybe it does that.
I think you're right. I think it does.
It probably does. And generally this is also why our episode titles, if you follow the main show, if you're just hearing this through your podcasting apps, you notice our episode titles are just the number of a show and then whatever the topics discussed were. If you go into our Patreon, the episode titles are much more cheeky because we don't title them whatever we talked about during the show. We usually title them things having to do with the Patreon.
Right.
It's a little bit of a different reality. So you can always check that out. Patreon.com/therapy. Thanks to all of our supporters. And a special thanks to Manu, who suffered throughout all of the trivia today and is also the builder of our website. She built our pretty website. Thank you for that.
That's right.
Just totally did that for us one day and was like, here, I can't stand staring at your broken-ass website anymore. I built you one. And
If
we were
you
like,
do go to the
"Yay."
website and do the search feature, don't type in the word therapy.
No.
That will break the website. The website can't take it.
It'll just implode.
Yeah.
It'll turn it into some weird vortex. You'll break the internet. Don't
Also,
do that.
don't just put in the pound sign.
Yeah.
That's also all of them.
That's right. You don't want to do that. Man, we're getting pretty close to 200 episodes.
Yeah, we're getting there.
We're almost there. So we want to thank our bosses. We want to thank the Saccharin 16, the mysterious and shrouded Illuminati members of our fan club, the Thera producers. Thank you, Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Robert Brownie, Jr. Mint, Kayla Lansbury, Elio Dare, Judy Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, King of Student Loan Debt, Dr. Ben Dahm, Crazy Banana Scoop, Mason Miller, Scott Jameson, Carolyn Albert, Leon Kassab, Kevin Chamberlain, Malaya, Richard Macy, Ezekiel Lawrence, Polygon, Cindy Ash, and Lord Colin Stewart.
And if you'd like to hear this episode uncut and unedited,
Why wouldn't you?
and enjoy our spontaneous side projects, go to patreon.com/therapy. And thank you for supporting mental health.
That's all the time we got for this week's session. We want to thank our landlords, Matt Mattingly's Ice Cream Social Podcast, and thanks to those of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Share this episode with someone who needs it. Go ahead and open up that description in your podcast app, and you can copy and paste the link we provided into your social media. Don't forget, you can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter @PodTherapyGuys, on Instagram @PodTherapyGuys, and at patreon.com/therapy.
Do you want to submit a question to the show? Ask anonymously at podtherapies.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I'm Suriname Jobin.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.
Suriname. This is
Suriname.
ridiculous. Do you remember that episode of... Did you ever watch The Animaniacs? Or were you too
Nope.
old for that show?
I was too old for that.
You were too old for that.